Let's bring you more on the new plan by European leaders to continue doing business with Iran despite U.S. sanctions. Eli Garanmaya is a policy fellow for the Middle East and North Africa program at the European Council on Foreign Relations. She joins us now live from London. Good to have you with us. So how is this mechanism supposed to work in a way that it avoids U.S. sanctions?
Well, essentially what this mechanism is doing is taking out the necessity for financial institutions and banks to be engaged to facilitate trade between European companies and Iranian companies. And where US sanctions have been most powerful is to essentially create a sense within the banking and financial community in Europe that they would risk losing their business with the US if they were to touch any business with Iran. So this mechanism is essentially creating what's called a netting mechanism between trade that goes in and out of Iran and Europe.
Well, does that mean that companies that do business with Iran, they will not face some punitive sanctions from the US? How is that part supposed to work?
Well, the companies that are going to be using this mechanism, which is called a special purpose vehicle, will still be facing some certain risks with the United States. What we can expect is that the companies that are going to use this mechanism are either not having a major business interest in the United States, so no US exposure, including to the US dollar, or that they are actually engaging in activity that is already permitted under US sanctions. For example, in the area of humanitarian trade with Iran, sales of pharmaceutical, medical devices and goods, which make up quite a big component of European trade to Iran.
But then in that scenario, then, does it really make much of a difference if it will only help companies that don't have exposure to the US anyway, or companies that wouldn't have been affected by the sanctions in the first place? So does this really make that much of a difference then?
So practically, the significance will start off small, with business trickling into Iran. The idea, and as statements have been issued by various European officials, is that they start off with a small endeavor that they hope to grow over time and expand once the mechanism is operational. What we need to remember is that this is really a new exercise that the European countries are engaged with. It's politically incredibly significant in terms of essentially saying to the US that their policy, not just legally but practically, is going to be different to what the US is pressuring them to do. And the hope is that over time, once the market has more confidence in this entity, more and more companies are going to be using it. But I don't think either Europe or Iran thinks that a company like Total, for example, will be using this mechanism from the first day. It will take time to create assurance and confidence in it.
Well, do you see a scenario in which, to use your example, a company like Total comes in not on the first day, even later? I mean, these are companies, you know, the most important ones are companies that make very, very large investments. Some of them have already pulled out from fear of the US sanctions. To get them to come back in, do you think this mechanism is going to do it, even if it's not on day one?
Well, first of all, this mechanism is meant to primarily support trade with Iran, imports, exports, rather than investments, as is envisaged at the moment. So they may look to find another type of mechanism to support investments. And again, who knows where we're going to be a year and a half from now on with possibly a different or altered US administration in the White House with the upcoming elections there. So the idea here from the Europeans is really to create a short-term mechanism to keep the trade trickling between them and Iran in the hope that this can expand. And in the future, you might actually be able to see some US participation in this mechanism or extended waivers and exemptions to companies like Total to utilize this mechanism. Because even when the US was part of the nuclear agreement and had eased its own sanctions, the financial sector in Europe was really blocked in terms of being able to transact with Iran because of a number of different issues. And so this mechanism could complement the more conventional banking financial channels between Iran and Europe, even under a future US administration that may have a different policy on sanctions towards Iran.
All right, I guess time will tell. Thanks so much.